No one rode toward that ranch unless they were lost, desperate, or already half dead. The woman arrived just as the sky began to bruise. Clouds dragged low across the prairie, their bellies heavy with wind, and the land answered with a restless moan that crawled through the grass and rattled the fence posts. The ranch stood alone at the end of a forgotten trail, weather-beaten buildings hunched like old men who'd seen too much and said too little. Its name was never spoken plainly in town, only hinted at, only warned about. She slowed her steps when she saw the gate. The fence was scarred, patched with mismatched wood and twisted wire, as if it had been repaired in a hurry more than once. The ground near the barn was dark in places where rain hadn't washed everything clean. Even the horses in the nearby pasture stood apart, heads low, eyes watchful. This was not a place that welcomed strangers. This was a place that endured them. She told herself she only needed a night. Shelter from whatever chased her. Hunger, memory, men who asked too many questions. Her boots were worn thin, her coat too light for the coming storm. Pride had already been spent miles back. All that remained was the instinct to keep moving. The door creaked when she knocked. The cowboy who answered looked exactly like the rumors described. Tall, still, eyes sharp as cut stone. He said nothing at first. Just studied her the way men studied weather when deciding whether to risk the trail. The wind tugged at her hair, whispered warnings into her ear. "You should go," she said suddenly, the words surprising even her. Something about this place pressed too hard on the chest. "I didn't mean to trouble you." She turned. That was when his voice stopped her. Quiet, urgent, close enough to feel without hearing. "Don't leave." She froze, hand still on the gate. Slowly she looked back. The cowboy hadn't moved, but something in his expression had shifted. Not fear, not kindness. Recognition. Like he knew what it meant to walk away when staying felt dangerous. The wind surged, snapping the fence wire sharp as a warning shot. She hesitated. And in that pause, no longer than a breath, the frontier made its choice. The ranch house stood heavier from the inside. Its walls were thick, built to keep out more than weather, and the door closed behind her with a sound that felt final. Outside, the wind kept scraping the land raw. But in here the silence pressed harder. Lantern light climbed the rough-hewn beams, catching on old scars in the wood. Bullet marks filled and sanded. Burns that never quite disappeared. This was shelter, yes. But it was the kind shaped by violence remembered too well. The cowboy didn't offer comfort. He didn't crowd her either. He moved with the careful economy of a man who measured every step, every sound. His eyes flicked to the windows more than to her. When he spoke, it was low and brief. "You can warm up," he said, nodding toward the stove. "Water's there." She did as told, but she didn't sit. She stayed near the door, coat still on, fingers flexing like she expected to run. Her gaze traced the room the way hunted things do. Counting exits, watching shadows, listening for the shape of danger. There were rules here. She could feel them. None spoken. All enforced by habit. He noticed. Of course he did. "You don't have to stay," he said after a while. The words surprised her. She laughed once, sharp and humorless. Funny way of showing it. He didn't answer. Just set a tin cup on the table and stepped back. Distance was his offering. Space instead of kindness. It told her more than words could. They shared the room like strangers sharing a storm cellar. Bound together by weather, not trust. Every creak of the house made her flinch. Every pause made him listen. She wondered which of them feared the other more. "You live alone?" she asked. He nodded. "Long time." "People talk," she said carefully. "They always do." That was all he gave her. No denials. No explanations. Silence thick as dust. Night settled in slow and uneasy. She took the chair farthest from him. He took the one closest to the door. Neither slept. Both listened to the wind scrape the ranch like it was searching for a way in. This place might keep the cold out. Might keep the dark at bay. But trust? That would cost more than either of them was ready to pay. Not yet. They learned each other through work. Not the kind meant to impress, just the necessary kind that kept a place standing. Fence posts reset at dawn. Water hauled while the sun still hid behind the hills. Supper eaten late, when the wind finally laid down. In those hours words came easier, not because they were invited, But because silence had been shared long enough to earn them, she noticed things first. The way he checked the ridgeline before turning in. How his hand paused on the doorframe, counting scars in the wood like old prayers. The ranch wasn't feared because it was cruel. It was feared because it had survived things other places hadn't. Because men who came looking for trouble didn't always leave with their stories intact. Her own story spilled out in pieces. Not a confession, more like weather. She spoke of a town that smiled until it needed someone to blame. Of a job that paid in promises and ended in a locked door. Of running when running was the only law that still worked. I learned early, she said once, staring into the fire, that protection was something you had to steal or make yourself. The flame caught the edge of her eyes, bright and unbroken. He listened without comment. When he did speak, it was spare. He told her about the first winter alone. About neighbors who stopped visiting after the shots one night echoed too long. About the rumor that grew teeth. How a single stand became a legend. Then a warning. Fear's a lazy thing, he said. Once it settles, it don't bother checking the truth. The truth came out the night the storm rolled close but never broke. He lifted a loose board beneath the floor and brought up a wrapped bundle. Paper stiff with age, marked and signed, names crossing names like wounds stitched wrong. She didn't touch them. She didn't need to. She could feel the weight of them from where she stood. Deeds. Claims. Proof of something stolen back and something owed forward. Evidence that tied the ranch's bloody reputation to a power that preferred shadows. An antagonist who prospered when fear kept witnesses quiet. That's why they whisper, he said. Not because of what I did. Because of what I didn't let disappear. She understood then why the ranch stood alone. Why help never came. Why leaving had always been the safer story for others to tell. The ranch was no bargain. It was a stand. It always had been. They sat with that knowledge until the lantern guttered low. Outside, the wind traced the fence line like a finger checking for weak points. Inside, something settled between them. Not trust yet, but recognition. Two people shaped by the same hard lesson, choosing for the first time not to face it alone. So I'll ask you, listening by the fire, what would you have done with those papers? Burned them for peace? Or kept them? Knowing peace would never come quietly again? The sound reached them before the sight ever did. Hoofbeats, measured, deliberate. Rolling across the open land like a reminder that nothing stayed buried forever on the frontier. The woman was the first to notice. She froze mid-step, eyes lifting toward the window as if she'd heard a ghost call her name. The cowboy didn't reach for his rifle right away. He simply stood, shoulders tightening, gaze fixed on the horizon beyond the fence. He knew that rhythm. It wasn't the hurried ride of a traveler. It was the confident pace of men who believed they had the right to arrive anywhere they pleased. 3 riders stopped short of the gate. Dust curled around their boots as they dismounted, coats clean, voices calm. Too calm. Didn't think this place still drew visitors. One of them called, smiling without warmth. Heard a woman wandered in. Figured we ought to make sure she didn't get herself mixed up in old trouble. The cowboy stepped out onto the porch. This land's quiet, he said. Best keep it that way. The rider's eyes flicked past him toward the house. Toward her. Quiet never lasts where it don't belong. They didn't raise guns. They didn't shout. That was the cruelty of it. The threat sat right there between the words, heavy as a coiled rope. The rider spoke of the past like it was unfinished business. Old disputes, old blood. A reputation that hadn't faded as much as the world pretended it had. When they finally rode off, the silence felt louder than the hoofbeats had. She didn't wait long. She packed what little she had, hands shaking despite her effort to stay steady. They came because of me, she said. This place survived by being feared. I don't belong in the middle of that. The cowboy watched her from the doorway. For a long moment he said nothing. Then quietly, firmly, you leave, fear wins twice. She met his eyes. They'll come back. I know, he said. Then why? Because I've spent too long letting fear decide who stays and who goes. The wind shifted. Storm clouds gathered low and dark in the distance. And for the first time the ranch didn't feel like a place people fled from, but a place preparing to stand. The ranch shed its silence the way a man sheds a coat before a fight. The cowboy moved with purpose now. He pulled rifles from their hooks and laid them out on the table, metal catching the firelight in dull flashes. He checked each one, slow, methodical, barrels clean, action smooth, ammunition counted twice. Outside he walked the fence line, hammering loose boards back into place, tightening wire where it sagged. Every strike of iron against wood sounded like a decision being made. She watched at first, arms folded against the cold, eyes tracking every motion. Then she stepped forward. "Tell me what to do." He looked at her, measuring. The old instinct rose, protect by pushing away. He swallowed it. "You see that ridge?" he said. "If they come, it'll be from there. Keep watch." She nodded once and climbed, steady, fearless in a way that surprised even her. They worked without ceremony. She hauled boards and stacked stones, learned which paths the horses favored, memorized the narrow draws that funneled sound. When he set trip lines low along the approach, she asked where to place them, then placed them right. When he marked an escape route through the brush, she traced it again at dusk until it lived in her bones. Vulnerability fell away, replaced by resolve sharpened by choice. Night came heavy, dragging clouds across the moon. Wind worried the eaves. By the fire, he handed her a rifle, careful, respectful, but first. "Only if you have to," he said. She took it the same way he'd offered it. "I know." They ate little. Talk stayed spare. But something settled between them, quieter than words. Trust earned by blisters and shared risk. The ranch, once a place people avoided, had become a stand. Thunder rolled far off, low and patient. Storm clouds stacked themselves like debts on the horizon. She fed the fire until it burned steady, then sat across from him, eyes reflecting flame. For a moment neither spoke. The world outside drew its breath. "What if leaving's easier?" she asked, not as a plea but a test. He shook his head. "Easier don't last." She nodded and the question passed. When the wind rose, he closed the shutters, leaving slits of light. When the rain threatened, she tied down tarps and covered the stores. By the time the first drops fell, the ranch stood ready, scarred, tightened, awake. They stood together in the doorway as the storm gathered, firelight behind them and dark ahead. The choice had been made, not with vows or promises but with work. Staying wasn't stubbornness. It was courage practiced with both hands. The ranch no longer waited to be feared. It waited to be tested. They came just before dusk, when the land holds its breath. The woman saw them first, dark shapes cresting the far ridge, moving slow and deliberate against the dying light. Horses. Too many. The sound reached the ranch in pieces. The dull thud of hooves, leather creaking, metal shifting. Not a rush. Not yet. Men who knew fear worked better when it had time to settle. The cowboy stepped onto the porch, rifle resting easy in his hands. He didn't curse. Didn't rush. His face tightened the way it had years ago, back when this ranch earned its name. Back when blood had taught the land to be afraid of him. He counted riders. Counted shadows. Counted the seconds between heartbeats. "They're back," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. The riders spread out, circling wide. Smoke drifted first. One of the outbuildings set alight, flames licking up fast in the dry air. A warning shot cracked, splintering the fence post beside the house. The message was clear. Come out or be burned out. The cowboy stayed still. Gunfire erupted without ceremony. Windows shattered. Bullets punched through wood, tearing chunks from walls that had already seen too much history. The ranch filled with smoke and noise, the air thick with the sharp stink of powder. Then silence. Heavy. Waiting. That was the worst part. In the stillness, memories clawed their way back. Faces he'd buried. Choices he couldn't unmake. He'd once met violence head-on, answered every threat with blood until fear did the work for him. That was how this ranch became feared. That was how he survived. But not this time. A rider rushed the side door. The cowboy fired once. The man fell hard, sliding in the dirt. Another tried the porch, 2 shots quick and clean. The siege tightened, the attackers adjusting, pressing closer. They weren't here to scare him anymore. They were here to finish something unfinished. Inside, the woman moved with purpose. No panic. She reloaded, passed ammunition, kept low. When the roof caught fire, she grabbed the bucket without waiting for orders. Smoke stung her eyes, but she didn't retreat. At one point, when the gunfire lulled again, she looked at him and said, "This is my fault." He shook his head. It's the past's fault. And I'm done letting it decide. The antagonist finally showed himself, riding forward alone, confidence riding shotgun. He called out the cowboy's name like it was an accusation, spoke of old debts, old blood, old proof that needed erasing. He promised this would end quick if the woman was handed over. She stepped toward the door. No, the cowboy said. Firm. Final. She hesitated, then nodded, standing her ground beside him. That moment, small, silent, changed everything. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't running. She was choosing. The attack came all at once. Gunfire tore through the smoke. Flames roared louder. Horses screamed. The world narrowed to motion and instinct. The cowboy moved like the man he used to be, but tempered now, each shot placed to protect, not punish. When one attacker breached the back, she fired first, dropping him before he crossed the threshold. For a heartbeat, they locked eyes. Not gratitude. Not surprise. Respect. The antagonist tried one last push, charging the porch with 2 men at his side. The cowboy stepped into the open, rain beginning to fall at last, hard, sudden, hissing against fire and dust alike. He fired. Once. Then again. The antagonist fell, disbelief frozen on his face as the rain washed the blood from the boards. The remaining riders scattered. Fear finally louder than greed. Silence returned, broken only by rain and crackling embers. The ranch still stood. The cowboy lowered his rifle, breath shaking now that it was over. He looked at the woman, soot-streaked eyes steady. You stayed, he said. She nodded. So did you. And for the first time since the past came riding back, the ranch felt like something other than a battleground. Felt like a place worth defending. When the last echo of gunfire faded, the ranch stood in a silence it had not known in years. Smoke drifted low across the yard, thin as breath, carrying away the weight of old violence. The antagonist was gone, driven off with his men, his power broken, his hold on the land finally severed. What fear had ruled through whispers and threats had ended not with spectacle, but with resolve. Then the rain came. It fell slow at first, hesitant, as if the sky itself was unsure this place deserved cleansing. Drops darkened the dust, turned blood to rusted memory, and soaked into soil that had held too much pain for too long. The woman stood on the porch beside the cowboy, letting the rain touch her face. She didn't flinch. She didn't turn away. At dawn the land looked different. Scarred, yes, but honest. Broken boards were gathered. Fences were reset. Windows cleared of smoke. Each small act of rebuilding felt heavier than any gunshot, because it meant believing the future could hold more than survival. The woman packed her things that morning, slow and deliberate. Not to leave, but to put them away. When she stepped back into the house, it was with the quiet certainty of someone who had chosen her place. No promises spoken. None needed. Word would spread, as it always did on the frontier. But now the ranch would be spoken of differently. Not as a place to fear. Not as a curse on the land. It would be known as a place that endured. And sometimes out here that was the bravest legacy a place could claim. Out here fear has a long memory. It clings to places the way smoke clings to old wood, turning ranches into warnings and names into whispers. That land was feared not because of what it was, but because of what people believed it to be. And belief, once set loose on the frontier, could be deadlier than truth. But courage has a way of rewriting stories. The bravest thing done there wasn't the gunfire or the stand taken at the fence line. It was the choice to stay. To remain when leaving would have been easier. To believe that a place marked by violence could still become a home. Fear tells you to run. Courage asks you to hold the line and change what comes next. So let me ask you, traveler, when the weight of a place presses down on you, when stories say leave, would you go? Or would you stay long enough to prove those stories wrong? If this tale lingered with you, leave your thoughts here, where the dust has finally settled. Share what choice you would have made. And if you wish to keep riding these frontier roads with us, through stories of justice, belonging, and hard-earned peace, then subscribe and stay close. The fire burns steady now. The land lies quiet. And where fear once ruled, a future has been claimed by those who chose not to walk away.